Great Christmas it was, Owen, and my very best Christmas wishes for you, and the entire InfoWar crew. President certainly ended up on an extraordinary high at the end of this holiday season. The tax cut combined with the systematic exposure of the partisan nature of the witch hunt against him by Robert Mueller, I think has left the president in extraordinarily strong position. Shockingly, I saw a piece on the Hill today from my old Watergate nemesis, Carl Bernstein. And Carl Bernstein says, no, it's not the FBI that's corrupt, it's Donald Trump that is corrupt. Now, this is, of course, the same Carl Bernstein who, as part of the Woodward-Bernstein duo at the Washington Post, ignored his partner's naval intelligence background, ignored his partner's deep ties to the White House Chief of Staff, General Al Haig, who, very much like General Michael Kelly, is sleepwalking the 37th president to who sleepwalked the 37th president towards the gallows. Same Carl Bernstein, who, of course, ignored the fact that we now know, and he knew then, that the Watergate special prosecutors were communicating with Judge John Sirica in the Watergate trial, which was both illegally inappropriate and would have tainted that trial. Had we known that at the time and known that the trial of the Watergate burglars and their appeal was fixed in advance, well, there would have been no Watergate. There would have been no Nixon resignation. But today, Carl Bernstein ignores the extraordinary evidence that we saw last week, Owen. The tweets, the emails, the campaign contributions from Mueller's quislings to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
The text messages.
Quite extraordinary. Bernstein was blind then. He appears to be blind today.
But wait a second, Roger. Wait a second, Roger. The story says, guys, pull the story back up on the Hill, because I need to make sure that I have this headline correct. The headline is, Carl Bernstein, FBI isn't tainted, Trump's presidency is. I mean, Roger, it was obviously Trump that covered up the JFK assassination. So it's obviously Trump that's tainted. Trump was the one that covered up the truth about the JFK assassination. That was Trump. Oh, wait a second. That was the FBI, and Trump released those documents. Oh, I'm sorry, Carl Bernstein. You're just another libtard.
Well, this is extraordinary. The FBI financed and promulgated the phony Trump dossier, which was used incredibly as the rationale for the FISA court warrants that authorized the surveillance of Donald J. Trump and his campaign apparatus. This makes Watergate pale in comparison. Using the state apparatus, using the taxpayer-financed surveillance capabilities of the U.S. government to spy on one's political opponents, well, that's what Watergate was supposedly all about, but at least the Nixon operation used misguided outside forces. In this case, we have perverted the government for an illegal operation. You're on the Alex Jones Show. I'm with my colleague Owen Scheuer, and we will be right back.
It's simply incredible to me that people will publish stories that are 100% wrong. And not just the stories they publish being wrong. The truth is the exact opposite of what they're saying. I mean, this has always been the way with CNN and MSNBC. If they say one thing on those channels, you just assume the opposite is true. But it's just like this. Paul Krugman, New York Times, says 2017 was the worst for America, even though it was like the best. Carl Bernstein says Trump is tainted, not the FBI. It was the FBI that covered up the assassination of JFK. President Trump was the one that released the documents. So these people present to you news and stories that is not just completely inaccurate. It is, in fact, the exact opposite of the truth. So here is the libtard Carl Bernstein saying Trump is tainted, not the FBI, even though we have all the evidence to the contrary.
Everybody else is the issue here, not Donald Trump and his actions or those around him. The key word in all of this that he keeps using is tainted. There's only one institution that really has been tainted through these months, and that is the Trump presidency. It's tainted by the president's lies, by his disrespect for American institutions operating under the law, with traditional American democracy and the instruments thereof. He's contemptuous of those instruments. And what we're seeing in these constant attacks, which are undermining, indeed, confidence in the legitimate institutions of our government, which are trying to do their job. If the president is as confident as he says that this investigation is going to end very soon, and with him being exonerated, he ought to welcome all this instead of attacking constantly. He's doing a grave disservice to our democracy. And the really awful thing is that Republicans, particularly in Congress, but also an awful lot of the Republican, quote, establishment and voters, are going along and enabling him to make these claims and make everything the issue but what really happened here, and has our democracy been, and our elections, been undermined with some cooperation from the Trump campaign, from members of his family, from the president himself? The answer might be no. He ought to welcome the answer if indeed things are as he claims.
What an unabashed liar. Roger, if I was on that set, it would take every ounce of my integrity not to sock him right in the face.
You know, the funny thing, Owen, is I know Carl Bernstein, and I kind of like him. I mean, he's actually a pretty decent guy to have a beer with and kind of joke around. He's not a bad guy. But in this case, I'm really disappointed because Bernstein in the past has been a guy who has been willing to go where the facts lead him. He wrote a terrific piece for Rolling Stone some 15 years ago about the Central Intelligences co-opting and getting into using mainstream media and paying mainstream media reporters. In this case, he seems to be antithetical to the facts. He should where the facts lead, and the facts show that the FBI has very, very sadly been politicized, and their mission has been corrupted. So disappointment rather than anger at Carl Bernstein, because frankly, he knows better. The old Carl Bernstein would have been writing about the corruption of the FBI, not helping poo-poo it and cover it up.
You know, I'm glad that you brought me back down to earth by saying that, Roger, because, you know, when we talk about these political things and people just spout out lies, I mean, again, this is why people are like, well, why do you get so mad? They're lying. I mean, this guy's just lying, and then people actually believe it. I mean, why do you think, let me ask you, you know Carl, he's a nice guy. You guys go out and have a good time. I believe that that's true. We're all human at the end of this. So what motivates him to, I mean, does he really believe what he's saying?
Well, it has to be at this point in his career, a political point of view. But one cannot look at the stunning evidence that we saw regarding Peter Strzok, regarding the corruption of the FBI, and just write it off as meaningless. Look, we saw this theme from Brian Stelter last week when he said Trump is undermining law enforcement and he's undermining respect, for our law enforcement institutions. No. What he's doing is criticizing people who have burrowed their way into law enforcement and have corrupted that process. There's a very substantial difference. They're trying to cloak themselves in the credibility of the FBI and the credibility of the CIA. You see John Brennan, the former CIA director, trying to do this constantly. But the sad fact is those institutions have been politicized, and they no longer stand for the rule of law. They have been engaged in a massive corruption of our electoral process and the cover-up of massive crimes. It's very, very sad, in my opinion. You know, the other thing on my mind today is the fact that I predicted last week on the Alex Jones Show and on the War Room that the special counsel, Mr. Mueller, will seek to get the upper hand again in his epic battle to take down the president through the indictment of a member of the president's immediate family, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Now, we know that General Mike Flynn, who I believe is a great patriot and who I know for a fact continues to be 100% supportive of the Trump administration and this president and his mission, has testified that a senior member of the presidential transition instructed him to reach out to the Russian ambassador to set up a meeting. Let me stress that the action by General Flynn in reaching out to the ambassador is entirely legal, is within the scope of General Flynn's responsibilities as the national security advisor. Now, if that was not the president who gave that instruction, but a senior member of the presidential transition, the only senior member of the transition who would have that authority would be Mr. Kushner. Now, whether Mr. Kushner has dissembled about that or whether he's been tricked into denying it in the many hours of interrogation that he's had from both the FBI and the Senate and House committees, we don't know. But I could see a scenario in which Mueller seeks to get the upper hand again by bringing a process indictment against Kushner as he had against General Flynn. To me, this would be the perfect opportunity now, while the president is on a political high, to pardon both General Flynn, a great patriot, and his son-in-law, who in this case I think has done nothing wrong, and put Mueller back on his heels. That is both my prediction and my wish. Today, earlier today, the president's, General Flynn's brother, Joseph Flynn, called for the president to pardon Michael Flynn, again, a great patriot. So I say, from Joe Flynn's mouth to God's ear.
Well, and I do believe that there was a moment where Trump was addressing members of the press where he kind of floated the idea out there about thinking about pardoning Mike Flynn. He obviously didn't want to commit to it. But, you know, the reason why they're so upset with President Trump is the alphabet bureaucracies don't like the fact that they can't put out misinformation and lies without Trump addressing it on Twitter. They don't like that. They like to be able to lie to the public and not have the president set the record straight. So they don't like that. Then on the other end of it, in the media, they don't like the fact that Trump is pushing back. I think that that's honestly what bothers the Carl Bernsteins in the media, the fact that they'll say something or report something inaccurate, and then Trump goes on Twitter or does a presser and he says, no, that's fake news. No, you're fake news. You're fake news, Jim Acosta. I think that they don't want President Trump to push back. They just want to be bullies without any pushback.
That's why it's absolutely essential the president never give up his Twitter feed and never be talked out of not tweeting from the heart. I'm Roger Stone with my co-host Owen Schroyer. We're on the Alex Jones Show, and we'll be right back.
This is the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show. Owen Schroyer, Roger Stone with you, breaking through the lies and misinformation of the mainstream media, which has never been more apparent than it is, well, than it was in 2017, and that it is now. All you have to do is look at the clear bias in the media coverage of Trump. You can compare that to presidents in the past. Oh, wait, no, you can't, because there's never been anything like it. And, you know, that's a story, Roger, that kind of gets lost in translation. I mean, you look at the numbers. There's never been a president get as much media coverage. It's not even close. In fact, the negative coverage of President Trump probably doubles any coverage of any prior president.
No, you're exactly right, Owen. I think these things have to be seen in some context. Let's look at some of the things that are said by about our previous presidents. Andrew Jackson. He was vulgar. He was crude. He was outrageous. He was a brawler, considered today one of our greatest presidents. Theodore Roosevelt. He was an egomaniac. He was a braggart. He was a lightweight. He was outrageous. Oops. Once again, one of our greatest presidents. See, Donald Trump doesn't fit the mold of the career politician. He's not a guy with a wet finger in the wind trying to find out what to say in order to be popular. He speaks from the heart. He speaks from the gut. He speaks from instinct. He doesn't take polls to find out what he should and should not be saying. And so far, he's going to be one of our most successful presidents. We've already seen a record stock market, unemployment at all-time lows, the housing market in one of the greatest booms of all time. The libtards don't want to admit it, but he's on his way to an easy re-election. And those who are wringing their hands about the 2018 elections are way premature. The 2018 elections are not tomorrow. They're well over a year from now. And I predict a Republican triumph if the president sticks to his current agenda. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we have extended all of the New Year's specials at the InfoWars store. And these will run through the end of the year with free shipping. You can put your best foot forward and spend less and achieve all of your New Year's resolutions with some of these incredible products. We're talking about Myco ZX back in stock now at 25% off. Super Male Vitality at 50% off. Silver Bullet, I think the very best silver colloidal product out there at 67% off. My all-time favorite, Brain Force Plus. Get a case of this and give it to your favorite libtard. They need it more than we do. This stuff, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, it gives me mental clarity, gives me mental energy, helps me work another 5-6 hours a day. Brain Force Plus at an extraordinary 50% off now. Alpha Power, which I really think melds the best of the old and the new, some of the most ancient and effective Chinese herbs, melded with some of the very best cutting-edge natural substances today for a formula that gives you peak performance, both physical and mental. Alpha Force at 50% off. So these are just some of the extraordinary sales now. Alex Jones has decided to extend these incredible prices through the end of the year. Folks, help yourself. Help us pay for the war room and the incredible expansion we're having here at InfoWars by going to the InfoWars store now. You can help us, and you can help the fight for freedom and truth by doing your shopping at the InfoWars store today.
You know,
go ahead.
It's funny, Roger, because I was just thinking the other day, I ran out of hand soap, and I was like, oh, I got to go to the store and get new hand soap. And I was like, wait a second, we sell hand soap. We sell household items now. So when you think about hand soap and shampoo when you run out, think InfoWarsStore.com instead of going to the grocery store. That's another way you can support us. It's something that we don't talk about enough.
Well, and the auto ship function I really found to be excellent because, frankly, I'm so busy that I forget to reorder. And I got caught short without Brain Force on a long trip where I had to give a couple of speeches. And frankly, it was difficult. So I really like the auto ship function. That way, you're never without these products. And frankly, using them consistently will give you the very best result. So I really urge folks to use the auto ship function on the InfoWars store site. Oh, and I gave an interview to C-SPAN last Friday, which ran the Sunday in their Newsmakers program, where I reiterated the claims that I've made here on the Alex Jones Show, that I firmly believe that the two-party duopoly that have run this country into the ground, the elites of both parties, if they are unsuccessful in undermining and removing this president through the special counsel process of Robert the Executioner Mueller, they will move to a 25th Amendment strategy. Now, I admit that that may be hard to believe today because the president ended the year, or is ending the year, on such an incredible high, having jammed through his historic tax cuts, which I believe will turbocharge this economy. And with the partisanship and the naked mentality of Mueller's hit squad now revealed for all Americans to see. Do not underestimate the deep enmity that the ruling elite who have run this country into the ground have for this president and his politics. I believe they will be back on his throat like a pack of hyenas in 2018. And I do believe that the president will persevere. Once again, I call for the appointment of a special prosecutor in the Uranium One matter. Far more effective than firing Mueller and allowing the mainstream media to whip up a hysteria about a cover-up, the president should demand that the attorney general appoint a special prosecutor in the matter of Uranium One. That would once again bring Mr. Mueller, Mr. Comey, Mr. McCabe, and Mr. Rosenstein under federal investigation for their own crimes in the cover-up of Uranium One and the sale of 20% of our strategic uranium reserves to a company controlled by the Kremlin. You talk about Russian collusion, folks, there it is. Hillary Clinton and her husband and the entire Obama Justice Department up to their hips in collusion with the Russians to steal that important commodity.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if they want to push this narrative on through the midterms, Roger, because what we're seeing right now is that the GOP is seeing record funding. So the GOP is getting all this funding. So does that mean they're going to support the candidates that aren't career politicians that want to go along with Trump's agenda? Or are they just going to put in a bunch of rhyme?
We will make America great again.